Lions Rock Productions.
This is Jay
This
Moore.
is Greg Proops.
This is Jordan Harbinger.
This is Dexter from The Offspring.
This is Nathan
This is
East.
Sebastian Younger.
This is Rick
This
Marotta.
is Stuart Copeland.
This is Mick Gillette.
This is Andy Summers.
Hey, this is Skunk Baxter.
This is Gabby Reese.
This is Rob Bell.
Hey, this is John Leon Guerrero.
Hey, and this is Pete A. Turner.
Hi, I'm Dr. Sujay, and you're watching the Break It Down Show.
And now, the Break It Down Show with John Leon Guerrero and Pete A. Turner.
Yeah, our friend Harlan suggested I have you on the show, and I do what Harlan says because he has great clients, and I love to talk to the people that he has in his world. You, Dr. Sujay, you're incredible. You and I can also say Ambassador Sujay.
Hey, yeah, all of the above. Oh, you can say Dr. Fabulous now.
Dr. Fabulous. Yeah, you are fabulous. You do. I mean, whatever it is, you get it done. I mean, whether you're a professor at Harvard or writing 10 books, 12 books, 13, 15 books, writing, speaking, and doing things, you are a force, lady.
Well, you know what? You have to stay in a lane at a time. Like when you're on the highway, you can't drive in all three lanes. So I focus on what I'm doing at that particular time and it gets done. And then that adds more length to the highway. And I think people have to know sometimes you are multifaceted. And sometimes you're not. And so you have to know what you're really capable of doing and do that well.
You seem like someone who's motivated to not only get things done yourself, but show others how to get things done. I'm going to be unfair to the younger generations here. A lot of them feel like there's something holding them back. But in so many ways, we are the one nation where nothing has to hold you back. I mean, look, everybody's got to fight something to get. But how have you figured that out? Is it your generation? What is it? Because you definitely get things done.
Well, I'm a proud boomer. In fact, I just applied for Medicare. I can't believe it. You have to when you're 65 in this country. But I'm just one who's been surrounded by supportive people. My parents let me fly. And so what you're looking at is 64 years of experience, where I wasn't hindered. And even though, like you said, everybody has to fight something, you figure out how to either work around it, work through it, or bust it down. But you keep on going, or you go where there is receptivity. And so I have tried to make my life where they didn't like me, move on. And fortunately, my parents gave me financial freedom. So there were jobs that if I felt like you were just racist and not trying to help me go forward, you were sexist, not trying to help me go forward, you stay for enough to make sure your resume paint is dry. But if it wasn't the right atmosphere, it's like, well, this is not for me any longer.
Yeah.
No. Hey. Goodbye.
Right. That takes some courage, though. Where does that courage come from?
Coming from historical parents who started as sharecroppers and had to do a whole lot to get to where we are now, and their parents and foreparents before them who, were forced labor in this country, you keep going and you get your strength and you kind of make sure you surround yourself with your village and positive villagers, and you do it. You eat well, you live well, we socialize well. When we had parties, it was the whole family in the basement. The parents had their little thing going and the teenagers had our thing going, but everybody knew each other and it was clean fun. And I think that's what you have to do. You have to have a village that's supportive and that says, I'm cheering you on. You can't quit now. This is not the time. Stay a little longer, get those credentials. And so when the doors and the opportunities opened, I was credentialed, I was experienced, and I was ready for the moment. I heard a man, Dr. George Fraser, he said, don't get ready, be ready. And I think that's really what you have to be ready when the opportunity knocks, because it's a very small window, a very short period of time, and you don't know if they'll come knocking again. So, even with this ambassadorship, I was the U.S. ambassador at large for international religious freedom. First female, first African-American, first faith leader in the role. And we all served at the pleasure of the president. So I had the fortune of serving for President Obama. But I had 8 years with President Clinton prior to that, and then government, you work hard. Nothing is given to you. I had 8 years with him. I had at that time 30 years of senior pastor of a congregation in inner city New York. You work hard as a pastor. And all of that together. So they said, we know your faith experience, we know your political experience, but do you have any international experience? And, all of that together. So I had just made a list of all the countries I had traveled to, starting at age 14, where I studied abroad. And I was able to send them a list of like 20 countries I had been to. And they were like, can you send that over? And I was like, yeah. So it was just a matter of pressing the send button. So here you have faith leader, political participant, and someone who's internationally traveled. So they were like, we have this position called U.S. Ambassador for International Religious Freedom, and we think you're the right fit for this. Now, it has to be a Senate confirmation process, but on paper, you match the job description. So are you willing to kind of go the extra mile and go through what it takes? And I was like, yes. Number one, it was my 30th year of being a senior pastor in the Bronx, New York, and I was tired. I was like, had done what I felt my mission was in that place. I was young enough, my family was strong enough for me to be able to say, yes, I can travel. Yes, I can move to Washington. And you have to have all the pieces in place. And so when the Senate confirmation hearings came, and they were tough, no one, what we see on TV with the Supreme Court justices and the cabinet, we have to go through that as well. It's just not as televised, but nobody gives you anything. In fact, this is probably the toughest thing I've had to go through in a long time. And I had to go through two because my first nomination was held. But you feel like I can do this. So it took a year and a half, and 2 confirmation hearings later, I was unanimously voted in. But when the going gets tough, the tough get going, and you have to be able to be tough enough. I think Secretary Clinton used to say when she was running for office, you have to have thick skin. You can't cry every time they look bad at you or say something bad.
That lady has got rhino skin. She's tough as nails.
Yes.
Yeah. Look, I'm not even a fan of hers, but I respect the hell out of how tough she is and how and the doors she's opened and knocked down. I mean, ladies from your generation especially have really taken the opportunity offered and done incredible things. I mean, it is incredible. I wanted to ask you about those Senate confirmation hearings. You said televised. I think we also need to say the word politicized, because I'll watch Lindsey Graham point his finger at people. I'll watch Kamala Harris point her finger at people because the camera is there and they want to be seen.
Yeah.
Was it politicized as well? Or do you think there is, it drives me crazy that people put party before the qualities of the person themselves.
Oh, yes, very politicized. And at that time, it was not just Republicans, Democrats, it was also the Tea Party.
Oh,
and they were adamantly opposed to any of President Obama's nominations. Some say it was, in terms of their political party. Some say it's because of their racial, issues. Yeah. And it was really both. And so it only took one person to hold my hearings, and that person was a Tea Partier. And at that point, you don't have to identify yourself. You just kind of say, she's not going through. I aced the questions. I mean, there was like, everybody in the room was like, where did you find this woman? Yeah. And then you hold my vote. So, and you're not guaranteed a second hearing. But It was very interesting because people on the other side of the aisle came to my rescue and basically said, you know what, we feel like you're the right one for the job. And so it was wonderful. So there's a point in the hearings where they say, well, the family of Susan Johnson Cook stand up, and it's supposed to be my immediate family. And all of these people from both sides of the aisle stood up together. So it was this wonderful display of unity and undergirding. And so that's how I started off my ambassadorship. So I'm very, very grateful.
There's a power in being a pastor, running a flock. And like you can put the best speech in the world out, but the time someone spends in your chamber talking to you, you getting to know that one kid and saying those, you don't even know you're doing it. You're just being a pastor. But 10 years later, 20 years later, they're like, you know what? You changed my life with this one sentence. I mean, you have 100 stories like that. So yeah, the sermons are important to move the flock a little bit, but it's those one-to-ones And if your job is to go do what you're describing as an ambassador, who better than someone who's well educated, who's got decades, in the pulpit? I mean, I'm glad they realized that with you.
Yeah, it was, and I was the first faith leader in this role that's called International Religious Freedom. And what I was able to do was, I was able to bring all faith leaders together. It didn't matter whether you believed or not believed. There were agnostics, atheists, but whatever. And they were like, we're sitting at the table. And so that, what we call the Religious Freedom Roundtable, is still going on. I was able to institutionalize that. Bring women to the table. There had never been women at the foreign policy and national security table. So we called it Female Faces of Faith. And that's still going on. So when you're able to move the needle a little bit and to hear it's literally 10 years later that it's still going on, then you say, you know what, if I can make it happen, even in a small bit, just like in the pastorate, if I can make that one child who I go to court with life better, then I am making a difference. And so now this stage of life is more about legacy. My writing, my speaking, the groups I work with, it's about what can I pour out and deposit into this next generation of leadership. Not to do it the same way I did it, but to take the principles and to model what success looked like. And what I tell them now is, now my models are pre-COVID. And so you are the first generation that's gone through the pandemic as a leader. And so you have to create models that work for you. But these are principles that are always going to work. Be kind to people, be reciprocal, mentor. All of those things will work no matter whether it's pandemic or post-pandemic. Be kind to people, be generous, show up, give 102% if you have to, but show up and make the difference in people's lives.
I want to ask you, this is interesting to me. I watched that a couple of years back. There was that Ruth Bader Ginsburg documentary. And, you just feel, I felt so proud that there was this woman who just shook the earth with her legal arguments and everything. And just, incredible. But then also I watched the Clarence Thomas story, and it's also incredible. I mean, you see this dude come out of nowhere, just as poor can be. His grandpa going, you can live here, slip up once and you won't live here anymore. And recognizing that his race was a thing, especially from where he was raised. He's like, and I couldn't just be good. I had to be better every single time, get perfect scores on tests. And it drove me incessantly to do these things. But we don't see that same victory story here in the nation. For some reason, we accept one, but we reject the other, and in either direction. Why is that?
Well, you spoke earlier about respecting Secretary Clinton, and I certainly do. But before, I was a woman named, Shirley Chisholm. The first African-American woman in Congress. And you have to respect it. So each one paves the way for the next one. Whether their story is the American dream or accepted by Americans or not, or even not written in the history books, you have to give them credit. And so, everybody has their story, and it's the stories that shape America. My story is different than any other person. And if we don't get an opportunity to share our stories, which is why I write, which is why I do short films, then who knows that we existed. So a lot of times I think my story is like Hidden Figures, the movie that came out about the Black women who worked behind in NASA. So they're all, what's happening behind the scenes at Ground Zero. I just honored 5 women who were 911 operators on the day of Ground Zero. Wow. And they were the last voice that many of those who perished heard. They were given, tell my family these things. And they were never acknowledged. So I acknowledged them this year for the 20th anniversary. They're still working for 9/11. And they were so moved, but the community was moved because they were like, we never knew. And so I think for me, legacy is about sharing the stories that haven't been told, and we know the ones that have been, good and bad, but sharing the stories that have never been told and really honoring those, what I call the unsung sheroes and heroes.
You've been around the world as an ambassador, as a student, and you've seen these things, and just you can recognize how incredible it is to have this sentinel 24 hours a day, 7 days a week waiting. You press these three numbers, and we will not only find you help, we will find you the best possible help that's available, whether it's police officer or fire, whatever it is, we're going to get help to you, and we're going to get it there fast. It is remarkable that we have that. And I know a lot of countries have that, but there are a whole lot of places where, look, I worked in Iraq, I worked in Afghanistan. One of the questions I would ask people when I was in town, and I got to go to town a lot, was, if there was trouble, who would you call? And there was never the police. There was never that sentinel that they could call and know that something was going to be there. If they were getting accosted in the street, they wouldn't expect to be rescued by anybody,
right,
on their village. And so we do have these remarkable things, and we do lose sight of them. I mean,
we do.
Who's the first responder if not a 9/11 person?
Three little buttons and three little digits, and help is on the way. Like you said, we're an incredible nation, and so what I try to do is lift up the places that we are incredible, and now we have to shine a light on the places where we haven't done so well. We're not doing so well, particularly around the race issue. I'm raising 2 African-American men. I've raised past 10. But every day is still a struggle. You wonder if you're going to get the call, So I did this video one time. I called it the talk, the prayer, the cry. We have a talk. When I was growing up, it was the birds and the bees. This is your body's going to change. And these are the things you have to watch at 12 or 13. Now the talk is, you guys are big guys. You're going into stores. You hang out with little white guys, and they're not going to get stopped. You can be. So you have to do these things. The prayer is every time they go in and out of their home, whether they're with me or not, I'm praying for them to come back alive. And the cry is, one day you will get the call. At least one day you'll get the call. And so every Black mother cries. And, you can't ignore that. You can't act like, God bless America. You have to say, God bless my sons and my family. And that happens every single day.
Yeah, moms have a hard job. And what you're describing specifically is hard for young Black males. I did a series on prisons, and I called it the Prison Chronicles. And these were people that had committed significant crimes, murder. And they'd gotten out of jail. They'd been rehabilitated. But the thing you realize is that the system craves young Black men, and that penal system chews them up. And then we all look down on them for being part of that, for being the grist, whether or not they were a bad person or not. One of the guys I talked to, maybe you've heard of Shaka. He grew up in Detroit, and what he described was a combat zone, because that's my background. And he's talking about all these things, and I'm like, that's combat. Of course, you have PTSD from dealing with that. Of course, when you see danger everywhere you go, even if that danger isn't imminent and isn't present, if you only see danger, if he said that prison was an extension of his community, and that's not what I want. That's not what you want. I don't care what political party you're from. Nobody wants that reality to be a reality. And
now that it's privatized, it's a big business. And that's so people are kind of praying PREY as I'm praying PRAY for our sons. So let me say thank you for your service. I didn't realize, when you said Iraq, I said, of course, he probably was there in the military, but I wasn't sure. But thank you for your service to our country.
Well, the thing, too, about the privatization of penal colonies, and thank you for the acknowledgement of my service. The privatization thing is a reflection of what we want. We want people to be in jail beyond the government's capacity to do it. And I don't think the government does a great job of it either. But we crave people to be in jail. And this system absolutely feeds on people going through this process, whether or not they did the crime or not. We need, no DA goes out there and goes, we're shutting down courts because we've solved crime. That's another thing they run on. Right now, they're running on reform, which is causing more crime, which is going to cause the next guy to run on harder, lockdown. So we haven't got this figured out.
No, not by any means. And so we're praying totally. I'm in Atlanta where they're right now visiting my son. And, I think there's 250,000 cases behind, on the DA's desk. So lots of prayer, and I'm really starting to deal with Black men and mental health, or Black community mental health, because a lot who are in our jails are because of mental health issues, misdiagnosed, undiagnosed, undetected. And so I've started reading a lot of Bryan Stevenson's work, who, has helped people who are on death row, not because they were supposed to be there, unwarranted. And so I'm really starting to read a lot of his work and starting to interview people who are dealing with the mental health in our community, because that's a big piece.
If they made Pete president and really kind of king, because that's kind of what our president is nowadays, one of the first things I would do is I would put a stay on all executions, and any possible DNA evidence that's out there that might exonerate a person, especially on death row, would have to be processed immediately. Like I would, the first thing, because it just happens too many times. There's an active case right now with someone who was tried 3 times for the same crime, and there is someone other than his DNA under the victim's fingernails.
Wow.
And because of the legal system, the chicanery doesn't allow that test to happen. Believe that? I don't care what race you are. That's not what we do around here. Like, wait, we have this ability to confirm or deny this thing, even if it's inconclusive. Okay, you stay in jail. But that's not his DNA. So whose is it? Who actually did this crime?
Yeah. The sad part is that is what we do. So there's no chance for reconciliation, resolution. So yeah, it is what we do. So like I said, I'm 64. I'm seriously thinking about going to law school. Another thing, but really just my late brother was the first Black ADA in the Bronx and the first Black assemblyman in the Bronx.
Yeah.
And so he was a legal whiz, and I'm sure he would be taking up some of this now. But I'm just like, if we don't help, if we don't collaborate with people like Bryan Stevenson, then how do we get these cases resolved and moved along?
Yeah. Hey, let's talk about your books for a little bit, because again, haven't caught on. Dr. Sujay is a badass. And
this is the newest one, book number 18.
18.
1-8, my fabulous 5th chapter. It's my turn now. And the number 17, which came out literally a month before, is Rhythms of Rest, 40 Devotions for Women on the Move. So these are the 2, both on Amazon.com or JudsonPress.com. And really, like I said, trying to inspire folks through my writing, trying to help. So if I had to say, my ministry is wellness and wealth, that we have to close this generational wealth gap, and we have to deal with the wellness of our communities.
So for anybody who's looking right now, you can go and get more about Dr. Sujay Johnson Cook, and it's just DRS or Dr. Sujay, drsujay.live. You can do that. The links for the books, I'll be rotating them across the screen. If you're on the podcast side and you're listening, look in the show notes, you'll see them there. The thing with these books is you've written 18 of them, and you just put out 2 books in a month. What in the heck is going on here? 2 books in a month, not normal.
So let me start with Rhythms of Rest. So it's 40 Devotions for Women on the Move. Every year I do a wellness retreat. We call it Selah by the Sea. Selah is a biblical word that means pause. And I took 40 women away the year before COVID, and a woman who is an executive editor at Our Daily Bread came and said, why don't we put what they're experiencing in a book? So I have 40 contributing authors, some of them very first time being in print, and they are so excited. So this is a compilation of how you chill out. How do you get by the water and not take your computer and your cell phone? How do you really forge sisterhood with friends who are like you, busy all the time, but we're getting 4 days. We've invested 4 days in ourselves to rest. How do we do that? So this is on Our Daily Bread, and they're a wonderful publisher, and I'm so excited about all the women in this book and all those who contributed to the book. So I'm the big author, but there are 40 other authors who I want you to get this, and it's out hot on the press. Now, my fabulous 5th chapter is all me. It's about what do we do after the caregiving? Family, children, many of us are the sandwich generation, the boomers. The 5th chapter is anyone who's over 50. You could be 51 or 61 or 71 or more. It's what do we do? Do we dry up like a raisin, or do we have that life more abundantly? So I say, may the rest of your life be the best and the most blessed of your life.
Yeah, that's great. And I love you're trying to show us how to balance these things out, resting, but also recognizing this 5th chapter. I think it's fair to say that the moms out there dedicate so much attention to their significant other, the house, like the household, and then also kids that look, there's just no time left for mama, and then when the kids leave, there's a lot less household to manage. There's no more kids to manage in a lot of cases. How do you help moms find that relevance to make it okay for them to care for themselves, to do some of those things?
So the very first litany is I give myself permission. It is all the holes are off. Anything that's been holding you back, I give myself permission to have fun, to play sometimes. So I had some girlfriends that I'm very close to who came up from Washington, D.C. to New York. We went to see the Broadway show Tina, about the life of Tina Turner. And if she could be proud, Mary, with her legs going at 80, we could, at whatever age we are, be proud, whatever your name is, and have some fun. And afterwards, we went to dinner and we laughed and and we're very close. So one is to have a circle of sisterhood, that people who just like having fun, who don't put any holes on you. Number 2 is to do some things that are fun. So I say to women of faith, we know how to pray well, but do you know how to play well? PLAY. Do you just take some fun? So what we do on these Selah retreats, and we're having it June 20th to the 23rd next year, is we have 4 days, and we ask you to disconnect from all technology and connect with nature, with the spirit. Watch the waves dance, I call it. Just enjoy seeing nature play with itself. And then you have 40 other women who have come who will want to share time with you. So use that time. Or if you want to be just still enough by yourself, to take that and take the chill pill. And so we have in the middle of every day, like the Europeans have siesta, we call it mush time. M is for get a massage. U is sit under an umbrella. S is for take a siesta, or whatever begins with S, sisterhood time. And the H is hush time. And you have the choice for 4 hours in the day. We don't program it so tightly that you can't take time. But for 4 hours, you can do one of those mush things. And so we encourage you to do that.
That sounds like my kind of thing. I like mush.
Yeah. Mush time, just mush.
Okay, so mush time is great. How do you get better at go time? How do you get better at okay, now I've mushed, I've rested, now I need to be on task. Again, it's just, there's so many things to tackle, especially with this damn thing right here all the time, distracted. Yeah. How do you teach focus and get people going in the right direction after they've mushed?
Because rest is important for renewal. You hear things, you can think of things more clearly when you take some time, what we call downtime in the world. So I have developed these principles that we teach. So it's called the de-smog principles. Smog is when haze and fog all come together and you really can't see. If you're driving and it's a smoggy day, you can't see anything. No matter what you put, windshield wipers, you can't see. So the de-smog principles are, you have to, if you're going to be successful, digitize, energize, strategize, monetize, organize, globalize, and you got to glamorize. So I put 2 G's on there. So it's about, when is it time for you? And when you rest, you're able to hear some things. You're able to see what I can take off my plate, what I can consolidate, with whom can I collaborate. And you're able to hear yourself and really think your thoughts. And so I had 5 businesses going. So I've learned to my charisma speakers is now the events planner for my retreat. Rather than having a retreat, a speakers bureau, 3 other things. Where can I collaborate, get partners? Where can I consolidate? And so I've learned the word recreation really means recreation. For you to stop long enough so the creator can pour back into you that which you have poured out to others. Vacation means vacate the premises. I'm against staycations. I don't care how broke you are. Find 2 nickels and rub them together. So we take them intentionally. We call it Sailor by the Sea. We go to Florida to a resort where you've invested to be 5 stars. We don't do this as a Motel 6. And so for these 4 days, pamper yourself, eat well, sleep well, hang out well. If you don't want to go to bed, don't go to bed. If you want to sleep in, sleep in. But vacate your normal habitat, because if you don't, you will do the things you'll start thinking, okay, I got to check my phone. I've got to deal with the person in the next room, and they'll come to you, mom. Well, if your phone's not on and you're not around and your computer's not on, guess what? They'll have to deal with it till you get back. So that's how you teach people. And we have experts, of course. We have mental health experts. We have physical doctors that are there for internal medicine. And then we have beauty glamour people who are like as beautiful as you want to feel. You don't have to look like the model, as pretty as you want to feel inside, because your inside's going to reflect your outside. And so it's really about building the confidence and esteem or reconnecting with what was already there. But unless you take the downtime, you never can be up.
Who's out in front of you? Like when you go and you need this kind of counsel for yourself to figure out chapter 6 or, the next thing you need to do, who do you go to? Who do you look for?
Well, a couple of things. I think every pastor has to have a pastor. I have like 5 because I'm getting older. Some of them are gone now, but the ones who are there to give me that wisdom. So I call them Dad. I call them I have Dad Vaughn. I have Bishop Bryant, people who were my pastors at times in my life. When I was a pastor, I go to them. And because I was one of the first women in ministry, most of them are men. And so then I have to find my sister of villagers. So I have 2 places where I live in the summer. It's called Sag Harbor. It's by the beach. I need water to look at it, to swim in it, to be on it. If I'm near water, so all my houses historically have been either a block away from the beach or overlooking some water. So where I live in the summer is a place called Sag Harbor. I have a village of women who are summer women. And we can be on the beach together. It doesn't matter what you look like in a bathing suit. In fact, who cares? But we'll sit on the beach. We have a circle together. And I know anything in the summer, they're going to check with all 7 of us. Like, do you want to go out to eat? Do you want to go to the movies? Whatever. I'm going to be in that circle. And then in Washington, D.C., the circle I went with to see the Tina Turner Broadway show, we have been close for decades. And again, I lived across the street from them. So if we were going to look at fall foliage, if we were going to just celebrate somebody's birthday, one was going to bring the champagne, one was going to rent the limousine, one was going to make the hors d'oeuvres, and I may be the host for the party, And I knew that there were 6 other women, still are 6 women, that no matter how we move, are going to look out for me. I travel enough where I'm in these places frequently. And so I have women pretty much in every major city that I can be with if I want company, or if I want to be alone, they'll respect that. And I stay in a hotel. So that's who I go to for counsel, for friendship. At this stage and age, so many people are coming to me. I'm like, oh my gosh, am I the matriarch? I really didn't want this role. But I do that through organized institutional stuff. So I'm running a program called Black Women in Ministry. We got a grant through the Lilly Endowment. And so 50 women, 25 mentors are trained to mentor 25 newer women in ministry. And again, I'm pouring into them so that they can get the wisdom and experience that I've had. So, there's somebody over in front of me, pastors, and then there are people that are coming to me, but then I have people that are here right next to me that I'm walking with, and we share each other's pain, sorrow, joy, birthdays. And you know what? At this point, we don't talk about sorrow too much. I mean, if someone has a death in the family, certainly, but we're like, if we're still alive and we survive COVID and tsunamis and gunshots, then let's celebrate life. And that's really the tone of the Fabulous Fifth Chapter book. Let's celebrate that we're still here, the miracles that have happened, the pregnancies that didn't happen, when we were teenagers or whatever. Let's celebrate who we are, the families we have, and collectively, we're like raising each other's kids. Like, their aunt, whatever their first name is, to my kids, and vice versa. Their kids are, I'm Aunt Sujay. So we're loving life. We're not what they say, itching with a B. We're loving life.
No, I do know, and I think it's great that you have these communities. I'm similarly wired where I've always been, gregarious, outgoing. I have my introverted side, but
sure.
If I'm somewhere, even if I'm driving through, because I'll get my truck and I'll drive somewhere. I have no problem doing that. And if I drive through, say, Tucson, a couple of texts to go out, hey, I don't got time this time, but I'm waving at you as I whip by on I-10.
Exactly.
I do check in with my people, and I do try to get out. And sometimes they need me. Sometimes I need them. Sometimes all we need to do is maintenance chat, where we just check in and how are you doing? Pretty good. Like there's a lot in that, pretty good. There's a lot of.
And
my brother.
What we need to know is that we're near each other if we needed each other.
Yeah.
Like I'm across the street. I'm here for 2 days. I'm going to DC in 2 weeks for a business experience. And I'm like, I have this one night free. Anybody want to join me for dinner? So we have 6 people. We get a round table. And literally 2 hours goes like that. Because by the time we go around and catch up and giggle and toast someone, the evening's over. But I know that that's available to me. And one of the reasons I wrote the book, Fabulous Fifth, is because as I traveled speaking, you've been a speaker as well. Sometimes you're in this holding room in the library. And as I was thumbing through books, there were books like Halftime by Bob Buford and other books that had analogies for men who were mainly pretty rich men who were in the second half of their lives and were looking at what do we give back? How do we make significance? And all of the analogies were like football and tackle and touchdowns. And I was like, I'm not included in this story, but there's another story for women who don't compromise our faith, but need to learn how to have fun. And so it's written for where there was a void, businesses, what's the solution? Where's the question that you're answering that no one else is? And so I've just learned kind of like, this has been my life. Take what you want, chew off of it. These are my suggestions from women I've observed or experienced. And these are the ways we had fun. These are the ways we worked out. So I call it fine, fit, fabulous, and having fun. Women of faith. All the F's.
My brother passed away almost exactly a month ago today.
Sorry.
It's a horrible tragedy, right? But here's this whole, I like to write a lot. And the most recent thing I wrote, the first paragraph was just the word life. And that's a whole paragraph because life is a lot, and it does fill up a whole paragraph sometimes.
Yes.
So in that time while we've been grieving, which was a lot, and closing down his life, I also found my my birth father instead of my adoptive father, my birth father. And then I found new siblings. And then we're all off the races. So you have these concurrent, and I'm calling it the joy process instead of the grieving process.
Yes.
Very similar experiences. Your emotions are careening around, and there's even some anger in there because, there is this, look, I'm not mad about this at all, but in there are the emotions. And it was the 60s, and my birth father's like, I can't do it. I got to go. Right. And so there's some stuff to deal with there, but we don't talk about joy as a process or going through these things and understanding how to navigate it. Sure, we might know about grief, but what are your thoughts on the joy process?
first of all, my condolences to you, but I'm so excited to hear you talk about joy because that is an emotion. And, I'm a scripture-based woman. It says the joy of the Lord is our strength. And you have to, and it says weeping may endure for the night, but joy comes in the morning. And you have to find those places of light, of morning. morning, even though you're mourning, mourning, you have to find those places in life. It's not just surrounding a death. It can just be anything in life. You have to find the joy spot. And you will find physiologically that your body changes, that those, I think it's called endorphins kick in, whether you're exercising or you're experiencing joy, your body responds to that. And so you have to do that. So I am so glad that you are finding joy in the midst of it. Again, my condolences. My brother, I only had one sibling, passed at age 57. And we had to find moments of joy in a very painful time, and continue to do that. So it's going to be lifelong because you're going to miss him for the rest of your life. But what's good about what's happening? And so finding the new siblings, finding the new family, I think that's just a wonderful thing. And how are they responding? Are they like they're as joyful as you?
We're measuring everything a little bit because we're all going to get together basically next week. So there's two of my three siblings, are able to really kind of interact. The other one I'm just going to meet next week, and he knows of the new discovery and everything. And then I think my father and I will probably get lunch or something next week too.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, that part has been great. The other thing I wanted to talk about too, because it's part of this whole thing, is all the people that say, hey, I want to make sure that I'm here, or what can I do? And it's okay. I'm telling the audience, less than you, but I know you'll amplify this. It's okay to say, here's exactly where I need your help. Like right now below, there's a link from my brother's family to financially help them bridge this gap, and because they're never going to get my brother Eric back. He's never going to be able to make them, a good salary again. So we've got to try to get them through where we're at. That's a big thing. The other thing is simply calling these people. When someone is in the middle of their rope, it's okay to talk to them and care about them. You don't have to wait till they're at the end of their rope and out of energy, and can't, like, someone at the end of their rope can't reach out because all they can do is hang on to their rope and they isolate. So all of us need to reach out to those people. I feel that help you to manage things, and then think about, hey, my call might help somebody else. The reason why I found my siblings was, I'd waited 51 years and was like, man, it wasn't ever a priority. Then I realized I might be the missing piece in someone else's search. I didn't want to deny anybody that. And then all of the limiters went away, whoosh, gone. And I was like, oh, this could be something great for everybody. Let me now make myself available to it.
Yes. That's awesome. So, it's about, we used to sing the song, this little light of mine, I'm going to let it shine. And it really, when you display joy, it really does shine. And that glow kind of becomes contagious. So, I have a friend who says, when I walk in the room, that's when the party starts, because she brings this energy and this joy, no matter what the situation is. It could be a wake of a funeral, but when she shows up, she's saying, I have arrived and I want to change the atmosphere from dull to energetic, from sad to joyful. And it really does happen. So I've kind of adopted it now. She just made 88. And so I kind of say, when I show up, that's when the party begins. And I have friends. One of the reasons my website is drsujay.live is because I'm live and in living color. And I want you to know I'm live and alive. And that's, I could have chosen .com and .org and all the normal ones, but I said, no, .live. That's me.
I love it. I was actually going to ask about that because there's usually a thought process when you're like .com, org, whatever it's going to be.
So everything I'm changing to .live, where I'm able to purchase that domain name. It's just like, that's kind of how I exist. And my parents were live. Like every Sunday, my dad was Baptist, my mother was Presbyterian. So we all went to church, but we weren't all in the same church. And then at the end of service, my mother would run home and start cooking. She was a great cook. And my dad would invite all these people literally from the community or from their churches. So every Sunday there was a social gathering at our house, every Sunday. And it was just the best way to grow up. So when I would leave for college, people were in my living room. When I come home from college, and it was the house people wanted to be at. And so I was never restricted on being alive. And, so we were preachers that partied, because New York has a social life that you don't sit in the corner and with a collar on and your Bible in your hand and say, I am so holy that I am not going to be social. No, you're a part of the fabric. And it's because you're human that people are able to see the spirit in you. And they're able to see what a life is like that makes mistakes, but also gets back on the right path and can model that for you. And I think that's, in addition to financial freedom, I think just freedom are the gifts my parents gave me, to not restrict me at 14 to go study abroad in Spain when they didn't even have their passports yet, but to say, okay, baby, everybody else in the school is going who speaks Spanish, so you're going to Spain. The kids who study French were going to France. And to not, if they put me in this environment, to not limit me, because if you're the only one who doesn't go, then that's a discrimination against yourself. So they're like, no, we're going to find back then private school is $9,000 a year. And my parents only made like $4,000 back then. But they were like, no, we're going to place you where you can be positioned best for progress. And so everything that goes along with it. So if they're taking tennis lessons, then we're going to have to scrape up the money for tennis. If they're going to Spain. And so to be 14 and to land in Valencia, Spain, and then to come back to the Bronx, New York, where it was the Latinization of New York. So Puerto Ricanos were coming in, Puerto Ricano families were coming in, and many of the parents were first generation. So they were still only Spanish speakers. Their kids were now going to public schools, so they were kind of bilingual. And so to have this Black girl at 14 translate for the parents, this is what's happening in our community. And this is what they're learning in school. And this is how you have to go to parents' teachers' night. Even though they don't understand you, you have to show up. And so I knew life was going to be different. I knew life was going to be global. I couldn't articulate it, of course.
Right.
But I knew there was a world beyond 165th Street and the Grand Concourse that I wanted and that I was going to go for when I was able to go for it. So it's 14 was Spain. 19, I lived in Africa. There was a program that was like the precursor to the Peace Corps. They called it Operation Crossroads Africa. And we lived in the village with the indigenous people. And we had tents and mosquito nets, and we got bit up and all of that and backpacked. But again, it was like this world with college students from all over the world. Like there's something here. And so that just began a journey of salivating for more.
Wow.
And that was my life, which led to an ambassadorship where I had 199 countries in my portfolio and had visited 60 of them by the time I became ambassador. So I think everything, my lesson, we were talking about younger people, is that everything, even the things we call failure or losses, are lessons. And they're preparing you for wherever you're going to go. And you don't always know. You know where you'd like to go, but sometimes the path veers to the left, to the right, or there's a detour sign that said this highway is closed. You have to take this exit. But at least you've been on that road and you know what it's like to get back on the highway.
I love all of that. And, there's just a lot of commonality, right? When you have these kind of lives. My father went to Presbyterian seminary.
Sometimes it's not like that.
It's incredible when you look at these things. My dad had a degree in, I guess you would call it divine music, and played the pipe organ.
Oh, beautiful. Yes.
Through music. And so when I was young, our church was going to buy a pipe organ, and he was the guy, like, go figure out what we need. And so he would grab me, and we would go to churches all over the Western states. But then also throughout his exploration of faith, whether it was seminary, just in general, I realized like there's not just Baptist churches, there's all kinds of Baptist churches. And, if you want to see people that celebrate God, you go to a Baptist church because you're not leaving for hours.
No, you won't be there for a minute, a minute and a half, as we say. Yeah. So I was raised Presbyterian and confirmed Presbyterian, but my father's church was 10 blocks from my mother's in Harlem. So, Presbyterian church was an hour to the minute, it wasn't going over. You weren't going to hear a hallelujah. It was very prim. And so we would walk up to my dad's church, which was just warming up. And so I was raised in both traditions, and it was wonderful. So I ended up getting ordained in the Baptist world. But it was just so rich because I had these two faith communities that looked out for me. So my mother's church, they were like, where are you going to college? I'm like, I'm 5 years old. I just learned Dr. Seuss. And they were like, so where are you going to college? So they were putting into me, success, like failure is not an option. And my dad's church was like, so baby girl, we hear you want to go to whatever college it is. And they would put like in those days, a couple of dollars in your hand, which was saying, I can't send you to school, but I can send me with you to school. Take these $2 and get something that you need. And back then, $2 was a lot, but it was the sentiment saying we're with you.
Yeah.
And so I had that all throughout my life, so that again, when I got to school, some of them would bake cakes and they would wrap them in tinfoil and put them on Greyhound buses. We didn't have FedEx, we didn't have UPS. But again, they were like, this is what I do well. This is what I can afford. And so when you eat a piece of this cake, or when you share this cake with your college mates, you're sharing me. And so I just was like, oh my gosh, I'm about ready to cry because, oh wow. Yeah, those wonderful moments. Yeah. And those wonderful people in my life. Most of them are gone, but they were with me. Ooh, I didn't even know I was going to get that emotional, but yeah.
And I let you run with it. I mean, that's what we got to do. And I think the bigger point here is that as we lose connection with a community that goes to church, because we're just not as big, and it's not a knock on anybody's form of worship, but when we say we don't believe in a deity, but we pray or we give it up to the universe, it's still a deity, right?
Yes.
So you can travel the world by traveling churches. I always talk about this. When I lived in Florida, there was the same Catholic church for different communities. So there was the white Catholic church that was very pious, and oh boy, the guilt. And there was, if there was instruments, it was all very toned down. And then the Brazilians would come in, and that same dude playing the same bass would go from doom, 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 one string, to that same guy go, wow. And this is Stations of the Cross.
Yes. Isn't it amazing?
You would have the Hispanic folks that come in, and it was completely different. So like, if you want to understand tolerance, pizza tests, go to churches. You can take it. Look, you don't have to be religious to go watch people. And then you ever want to feel great? Be a visitor in someone's church. Look out. Yeah. You're going to get welcomed and thanked and taught. Right. And truly, and I say this specifically, you'll be blessed by the experience. And so you don't have to go to Spain,
Yeah, and you learn cultures, and classes. We don't talk a lot about that in America, but there's a difference between the poor person who was the sharecropper and the person who is now gone from that to middle class, and you begin to learn the different cultures. So my mother's church, even though she and my dad began as sharecroppers in the South, and so her Presbyterian church in the South was one way, but when she came to New York, it was the beginning of the Black middle class. And so we were in church with the first Black judges and the first Black lawyers. And so there was this success in the atmosphere that we're making it together. When one of us wins, all of us win. Whereas in the South, it was, if one of us gets out of here and gets to the North, then you'll send back for the Southerners who are in the South if they want to come. But one of us has to so we're going to put all of our money together to get one of you up there. And so, you learn cultures, you learn classes, You learn what makes people tick. What do they do after church? Is also an experience. And so all of that is about the cultures. I wanted to share with you, because you talked about Catholicism, one of my favorite trips as U.S. ambassador was to the Vatican. So as a Black Baptist preacher, female, I would have never been invited to the Vatican. But as a diplomat, I am invited into the prayer quarters of the Pope, and then traveled with the Pope to Assisi from Rome. And I cannot tell you how that felt, to sit next to one of the most powerful men in the globe, and what the Holy Father meant to Catholicism, and then to be in the midst of this place where you have centuries of legacy and history, and it runs so well. And to be this diplomat I'm in awe of them, and they're like, will you come in and pray for the Pope? And I'm like, what? When would this happen in life? Like, when? Of course. And so it was Pope Benedict, but to have that experience, you can't duplicate that. And you can't make this stuff up, as they say, So it's a long way from my parents in the fields of Monroe, North Carolina, and Petersburg, Virginia, where they worked for someone else. It wasn't called a plantation, but it was as close to a plantation as you could get as a sharecropper. So they used an outhouse. And so we went from the outhouse to the White House. And to have their daughter to be able to walk in the front door of the White House and sit with two presidents and pray for them, and then to pray for the Pope, is like, wow. It's amazing, and it's a life journey. And I just value every experience, the good, the bad, and there's also been the ugly. And so just continue to pray with me and pray for me. And I'm not down and I'm not out. Just going through some rough patches every now and then. But because of my faith, I also believe that there's light at the end of the tunnel, but there's light in the tunnel too.
No, I love it. I love it. I just want to point out that all of Dr. Sujay's books are available on Amazon, and there's a load of them. The two we're talking about today are Rhythms of Rest. And it's like a daily devotional kind of book. And then you have My Fabulous Fifth Chapter, It's My Turn Now, which talks about phases of life. And if you are later on in your life, you have this freedom explodes. Instead of looking down like, oh my gosh, I'm getting old, my back, lifting you up. I love it. And I really appreciate you coming on. You're such a ray of light. And in a time when we're all just so torn apart and just intolerance is so easy, here you are talking about traveling the world and, through faith, having a prayer with the Pope or presidents coming from sharecropper families. I mean, it is what makes this country incredible if we allow it to be. Yes, we have problems, but also look at what you can do. The first this or the first that comes along. I mean, this is an incredible place. And if you ever deny it, I'm not talking to you, I'm talking to the audience.
Right.
Go talk to immigrant families. And when they see the opportunity here, I mean, there's so many people out in the world that are like, I just can't do anything here. But if I could get to America, look out. And that's why I always say, like, my favorite American is the next one, because look out. They're betting everything. They're leaving their home country and saying, all I need is a shot. I want that person here. I want that person to succeed. I want them to go give it their best. And we can all be their example.
Very, very much so. I mean, Vice President Harris said this way. I'm the first. Ooh, I don't know what just happened.
You're good on my end.
Oh, really? Okay. So she said, I'm the first, but I won't be the last. And I say it this way, I'm the first of many, so that there must be others that you bring behind you. And finally, if you put my name in, if you put Suzan Johnson Cook, then all of my books will come in. I'm called Dr. Sujay, but my name is Susan Johnson Cook. So you put in the Z so you'll remember me. And it's been my honor to be with you. Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you. Let me wrap this thing up. Stand by for one moment.